So for purposes of time, what I'd like to do is do a little organization of how we're going to answer questions. The 70s group, everybody was just kind of jumping in. And that's okay too. But we have to have a little bit of order, ground rules, and I don't see the gavel here. Last time Jim Rosenberger had a
I left it
gavel.
at home, I was in a hurry.
All right, so somebody, all right, George, you can use your fist and pound the table.
Oh, okay.
We have Kevin Cody here
Who
as
was that?
well.
In the glasses?
I
I
thought
thought
you
you
were
were
glasses on so I can nod off and.
Yeah, I thought you were just not,
You were right, don't let Biden be your guide.
Okay, so what I'd like to do is we could start with Jim, and for the first order of business is maybe just give a 2-minute introduction as to who you are, and also if you'd like to, when you introduce yourself, maybe share what motivated you to run for city council. What was it? Was it a hot button item? Was it just something that you just wanted to do because you wanted to serve? Did you want to do it because you have a big ego and you wanted to kind of push people around? I mean, whatever you'd like to share with us would be most appreciated. So, Jim, we'll start with you.
Okay, all right, Jim Rosenberger. I served on the city council from 1986 to 1989. There was a change in dates as to when they would hold the election, which shortened our term by about 4 to 5 months. I got on after spending the previous 15 years or so involved in the city as a citizen and as a member of the planning commission for 7 years back in the 70s, starting at around age 26. The council at the time, in their infinite wisdom, saw that they needed a youthful perspective on the planning commission. However, the members of the planning commission, of which there were 6, others beside myself, didn't necessarily agree with that, so 4 of them quit when I was appointed. And here I am, a 26-year-old, having to deal with the fact that they didn't like me. They really didn't like me. Anyway, I stayed on for 7 years just to spite them. And then took a break from 1980 to 1986, at which time I ran again. And the reason being that I just thought that it was appropriate to kind of carry on some of the policies of some of my predecessors. There had been Chip Post and Hank Dorfling and all of the whole movement toward keeping the community or downsizing the community in a way, height-wise and density-wise. And one of the people I ran against was totally of a different persuasion. He's no longer with us, so I don't want to demean him too much, other than for his politics. And so I felt it was appropriate timing to step forward and run.
Okay, thank you. Chuck?
I'm Chuck Sheldon. Unlike Jim, served on the planning commission for about 8 years. I felt the city was going down the tubes in 1980 because George was on the council. And so
Which
I decided I would run for city council in 1980 under the banner of Restore Pride in Hermosa. I think I lost. I think I got 6 votes. I'm not sure how many votes, but Schmeltzer just killed me, and we became friends after that. Good friends, and I ran for council in I think it was 87. Was I on the 86, 87 to 91?
87.
Yeah. I was intending to run for president of the United States, but I thought it would be a good starting point would be to just start at the council level, and I never got close to the presidency. That's it.
All right, thank you. Kathy?
First, George put me on one of the things, the one that is no longer about the people that work for the city. in
Civil
the-
service?
Civil service, yeah, I was on that almost 4 years. And Lance, I took his, one of his things, he was doing El Camino in here, and it was one of my last ones. And he came on to me after that was done and said, you know, the city clerk isn't going to do it anymore, and I think you would be a good one. And it started.
Yeah, so basically Kathy, Lance recruited you to serve the
and
community.
I had someone, a guy, and he flew out before the thing, and nobody wanted it. So, suddenly,
Okay.
I had 9 elections in 5 years.
Wow. Okay.
That is what I did.
That's very impressive. Very impressive.
There was no voter fraud, was it, during your term?
Oh yeah, the hotel.
No voter fraud.
Voter fraud.
One.
No.
No, because there was no mail-in ballots at that time.
Oh, that's right.
Oh, all right.
And,
Thank you for that, George.
and for 5 of them, like, they were only in the city. They didn't go to, you know, they helped at, you know, when I was just.
You did one of the first with, we got a machine, we got the punched cards.
Oh, yes.
Remember joggling the punched cards?
There
Putting them
was-
in and ran through and we got one count, and we joggled them, put them in again, and got a slightly different count the second time. But it wasn't enough to change anything, but it was interesting. And
But-
I learned that that had to do with the Chad. So this is
The hanging Chad.
This is pre-Bush and everything. The Chad would get in the way, and it would cause a misread of the cards going through. So if you took them 20 times, the Chad would finally disperse, and you'd get about the same result each time. But you ran several elections like that. Everybody was in City Hall for the
And
count.
as the stuff was always moving, there was a company you could do, they would do the cards, and they had the things for the
Right,
night.
Right.
And, but even back then, there was a state thing that every election, you have to take one place and bring them out and do them by hand. So that everybody could watch, and we could see one was perfectly okay.
Yeah, yeah.
It's almost like an audit that they were doing.
Yes,
To make sure to keep it
short
honest.
one, and of course, on the hotel, we went to court.
Wasn't that one vote?
That was the village.
Wasn't it Tony DeBellis's
Yeah, he
vote?
voted outside of his
Wasn't it?
precinct.
He had moved,
He had moved, right.
and he called Lori and asked, you know, can I vote? And he didn't want to talk to me because I was trying to get on the council already, so. And he was our friend, you know.
Yeah.
I worked for Chuck before I was city clerk.
Yeah,
I was,
she did.
I was doing, actually, what was I? I never did it hardly.
Lots of good stuff.
And then, you know, Hermosa is the smallest city, even though we're very crowded. George, through my ex, was in our house for a while before we were selling it, when we were getting.
When we came back from Greece, we had been in Greece for a year and needed a place to stay. The Sheldons put us up for a week or two, and then we rented your house till we bought a place down on 24th, yeah.
How nice is that? Okay, George. Thanks, Kathy. George?
Well, unlike my colleagues here, I was never on a commission.
It showed, George.
I was never active in the city till the then city council decided they're going to consider adopting a redevelopment agency, California Redevelopment Agency, which was similar to the urban renewal federal program that Redondo Beach used, and lost their downtown, created that marina down there, and So it affected our property. And they had eminent domain powers, and the history was it could last 40 years. So some people thought that I was electable because I was born and raised in the city. My kids were too. I went through the school system and my kids. And my late father and mother, they had a grocery store in Hermosa. So everybody knew the Barnes family, right? So, went behind the ears, still in. I threw my hat in the ring. I got the most votes. They made me mayor pro tem. But when it came time to be mayor, they didn't think I was qualified or had enough experience. But I became mayor.
Okay.
You know, I don't want to go into all that. But so, that was the main reason why I ran. And I said, if elected, my first action will be to dissolve the redevelopment agency, which I did. And we're the only city in the whole state of California that actually adopted a redevelopment agency and then rescinded it. Because it went to a vote of the people, an advisory vote, and it overwhelmingly, went down in defeat. Unlike Kathy here, I feel like I'm not even prepared for this get together, because look at all this. And maybe what the Historical Society should do in the future, because she retired as city clerk in the city of Downey, and she can tell us everything about Downey.
10 years.
Yeah,
That was my
many
last
years.
thing.
Yeah.
So she knows where all the bodies are buried in Downey?
Yeah, she does. I'm sure. And Hermosa.
I like them.
So I thoroughly enjoyed, my 12 years. I was elected in 1974 and re-elected 2 more times, and I left the council in 1986. And I accomplished a lot of things. Kathy actually reminded me.
We'll get to
I
that.
was you don't? Well, I thought no.
No, it's okay.
Well, one thing. I'll just
Sure,
one
go
thing
ahead.
I
Go
accomplished.
ahead.
I brought the television
Right.
into the city council
Big
meetings.
thing.
That's a
So
big...
we'll explain more about
Okay,
that.
that's...
And I got a lot of resistance, but I ended up
All
winning.
right.
Okay? Finally got a third
All
vote.
right.
George
George Schmeltzer.
So I
You're
have all
up.
the things that I didn't say the last time.
Well, and I couldn't find my notes the last
Nice
time.
of Chuck that
So give us a little introduction
Yeah,
and
so George
why you
Schmeltzer-
decided to run for
George
council.
Schmeltzer moved here in '62, still here, and served 8 years on the city council and enjoyed every hour of it. I really did. When I was running second time and I heard Sheldon was running, I thought, oh my God, Missy's gonna cream me, Fortunately, it wasn't Chuck, or it wasn't Missy, it was Chuck. So I knew I had a half a chance if I'd have run against
And just for
him.
clarification, Missy is Chuck's wife.
Yeah, yeah, for clarification. So if it had been Missy, I never would have gotten on the city council, I'm sure. I'd watched her perform in front of the school board a couple times, and believe me, I was not quite up to her being on top of the issue. So anyway, so I got into it because Al Valdez and Naoma Valdez kind of urged me to get into it. They invited my wife and I out for dinner one night. I thought, wow, that's really cool. And I was on the improvement commission, and we went to dinner, and it was just a setup. They were just going to beat me up. They were having trouble finding somebody dumb enough to run, and so they talked me into running, and that was it. And I took Chip Post's place on the city council. He only ran for 1 term, and when he left, I took that particular seat after being elected. I got into it though because the city tried to pass an ordinance that was going to keep undesirable people out of Hermosa Beach. That was actual language in one of the ordinances. I'm sure Kevin will remember it. Unrelated persons and undesirable people. That's what they wanted to keep out of her. So I got up to speak in favor of undesirable people, and I've kind of been doing that ever since. And but that's what got me into it in the first place.
You served with them too, didn't you?
And what?
You served with the undesirable people.
I did. I felt I identified with the undesirable. Of the things that I worked on that I thought were really important and I think will go down, fortunately, the railroad right-of-way went through several councils, and consistently, it was thought that buying it from the railroad was the thing to do. The question was how to do that. They weren't interested, finding the money. So it stretched over a number of years before, I think, Jim's council finally did the deal. Or one of his councilors. I think that's a great one, and we're noted. I think that's one of our national bit of news we get on the national scene was our ability to purchase that and kept it. And this community center during the Jimmy Carter era, we were able to get money from the feds to help us acquire this. And I think it would have been a terrible thing to lose it. And I don't think there were two people in town that didn't want to acquire it. One of them was Jack, didn't care to, and I think George had questions on it at the time. But now I don't think people do. I think it's pretty clear this was a major accomplishment.
This is my alma mater.
Yes, right, and my kids too. And the purchase of South Golden Valley, they were major. But the other big thing that I thought tied all of the, I was talking to one of the reporters at the AG Reader, that tied all of the councils together from 72 to what today was downzoning. And they trying to reduce density. And now, as of January, the state has decided downzoning has been too successful. We now must upzone. So SB 9 will go into effect, and we'll all have we'll be able to split our properties and develop four units. Anyway, I think they were the big accomplishments. They stretched over no one person. They stretched over a number of terms of various people, all of whom were here.
Wow, well,
Thanks
thanks for the comprehensive information. That's terrific. A lot of good information there. Kevin, do you have a question that you want to start with the group? And if so, we'll start with Chuck, since we started with Jim earlier.
Well, drawing in the SB 9, that's just such a reversal of what you guys worked on for 50 years. So Chuck, what were your thoughts on zoning? Was the city...
Well, actually, Hermosa being extremely dense, land use issues have always been at the forefront of council policies and thoughts. Density control, even though I was a real estate broker at the time, felt that we had to be very careful. The most significant density control issue I was involved in was the merging of the lots in Hermosa. There were several hundred lots that were 25 feet wide. I'm not sure, if not even thousands. Schumacher was the community development director. And Schubach, right. And I tried to get him to find every single 25-foot lot in Hermosa for the purposes of merging them into 50-foot lots. And I've never seen the council chambers more full in my life than people who thought I was taking their property, not me, but the council, was taking their property, and it was forever damned for my actions. Ultimately, we did merge several hundred, if not, the numbers escape me at the moment, but probably 2,000 lots, if you'll think about Redondo Beach and their 25-foot lots. We would have had several of those, and there's several hundred of those in Hermosa. And we merged those lots, and several years later, I got several emails from people who said, my lot is worth twice as much as a 50-foot lot that it would have been as a 25-foot lot. So I think that was the most significant action that my council took. The 17-foot setback was important. Jim and I worked on that. Maybe Kathy and I don't know. I can't remember. It all kinds of runs together in that time frame. But again, for the sake of emphasis, density control was the main issue. Reducing, getting bootlegs identified and removed. Having people use garages instead of stuffing them with odds and ends, so that we would increase the parking.
Still a problem.
Yeah.
Will always be.
So If that answers your question, a short question, long answer.
It is interesting because the solution that that council came up with on the lot side was if a building was built over the lot line, it automatically merged. And what the SB 9 does is exactly the opposite. It says no matter what you've got there, if it was once, if it's just R1, you could have as much on it as you want, as long as it's zoned R1, you can ministerially have it you can ministerially divide it. Don't even have to go down to City Hall. Just send them a letter and saying, I want to divide this property, and it would be recorded. So it really has come full.
And I don't know how SB 9 is gonna affect this densely populated city. It's above my pay grade to know in our little city, which is already very dense, how it's going to affect us. The council needs to have a thorough study, maybe even hire a competent consultant to advise us on, the last thing this city needs is 10,000 more residents. Maybe not even 200 more residences. It's completely built out and has been for 50 years, pick a number. So I think to add purportedly what SB 9 would add to this city is a disaster waiting to happen.
I'm going to throw in a 2 cents based on what Chuck's talking about. The issue, of course, often is not just people, but cars, because everyone has one or more of those vehicles. So I like to tell the story that in my particular lot, we were able to get 6 parking spaces on there, but the only way to do that is to really do it tightly. And so my story is, when I open my car door on my property, I'm trespassing. Because I'm on a neighbor's property as soon as I open my car door. One of the other things that nobody seems to get into that we've changed was there used to be a term called tandem parking.
Mm-hmm.
And tandem parking was great for the developers because it really allowed them to basically hollow out the first floor of a given property and just fill it with cars, even if you couldn't get to your car if it wasn't the back or the front car, if there was an exit on both ends. And we've eliminated that and over the years for the exact purpose of making life more livable for those that do have property here. So, my 2 cents.
I'd like to put a 1 cent in, Howard.
Sure, okay.
Okay, the mayor of Redondo Beach, and Kevin, I think, wrote an article on it. He is putting together a people's initiative statewide and asking cities to join, and quite a few cities have joined. And I think the city of Hermosa should join to put it on the ballot and defeat this SB 9.
I agree.
Redondo Beach is really taking a leadership role in this.
Where does that stand, George, that whole thing, the whole question? How many cities have signed up? Or
Well, I don't know. Maybe I haven't been following it.
who's their marketing budget? Who's
just-
running it?
Stacy was at
He just started the
legislative
meeting yesterday, I think.
Oh,
Just
started.
started yesterday.
And for purposes of the taping, the present mayor of Redondo Beach is Bill Brand.
Bill Brent, right.
So he's
I
initiating.
had a little senior moment there. He's my mayor, as you all know. I live in the great city of Redondo Beach now.
Oh, you do both.
Yeah, I
Despite
do.
all you did for Hermosa, you moved to Redondo?
Well, Hermosa they just kicked me out. It's just like they didn't want you on that planning commission, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
No, I'm just kidding.
Actually, it was my council, my election that kicked you out, George. Back in the day.
I lost by 12 votes. And I did endorse you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
For your service.
And we became very good friends, even though politically we're opposites, but sometimes we agree. And we compromised a lot, George. Although he keeps getting in front of this Hermosa Council and keeps telling them that we never agreed on anything, which is not true, George.
Well, I don't think he did agree on it, George. It was the buying a community center. And I can remember the argument
Purchasing the community
Yeah.
center.
being that the city was gonna purchase it from the school board. And that was like George or Chuck paying your wife because they're both taxpayer owned, so why shouldn't the city get it for free? You remember that?
Sure,
Yeah, I
That
remember
was an
that.
argument.
Yeah.
Sure, the school board had bought it, same people bought both pieces of property.
Yeah.
I was an owner of both, but we transferred, money.
Yeah.
That was a very sound argument, I thought. But you had to overcome it, or lose the property over a debate. That was a debating point. It wasn't something that was going to have meaning other than the loss of the property itself and the scraping, and ultimately would have been a used car lot.
Yeah.
And you probably remember, Kevin, I did not take a position, although all my supporters didn't think we should actually pay for it. And the citizens overwhelmingly, wanted us to buy it and to create this community center. And as George said, been so beneficial in the community. So anyway, it all turned out good. And my right wingers, they said, no, we don't want to spend any money.
And then the green belt, it was one of the times where the Hermosa seemed to best of Manhattan. I remember Manhattan was being sued by the adjacent property owners because the green belt was going to revert to the adjacent property owners.
A
Yes,
section of
it already
nothing.
had started. They were not doing it fast enough. And they wanted to start they said it was big enough to a house all the way.
Yeah. And Hermosa's was also, I think, big enough. But I can't remember
Yes.
how Hermosa avoided that dilemma. Okay, but Jim does.
A bit. We did observe the issue in Manhattan Beach, and we said to ourselves, now wait a minute, there must be another way to approach this. How about if we make the railroad prove their ownership or whatever of it before we pay them anything? And that put off our having to come up with any money, and also resolve that issue of who would take possession of it before we had to do anything, which, thank you Manhattan Beach for making our life easier.
But there was an early 20th century rule that said, and I think it's still in effect, that if it's the property is deemed as not open space, what's the word that comes to mind? It falls to the adjacent property owners,
Right.
and that's what was contested in Manhattan Beach.
Yes.
So it's public right of way, and then we've had the same thing along the walk streets in
Yeah.
Hermosa Beach. If they're abandoned, that is, you don't need them. I think you have to have 3 5. You don't need them now. You don't need them in the future, and you never did need them. The right of way. That it would fall to the adjacent properties, and I think they got caught up in that because they didn't take the approach that Jim's council took ultimately in acquiring it.
Yeah, the smart thing that Hermosa Beach did as well is they made sure that they had clear title
Right.
upon purchase, whereas Manhattan Beach purchased their part of the greenbelt without clear title. And as a result, as you indicated, it became a litigated issue.
Supreme
It was
Court.
the Farquhar versus City of Manhattan Beach.
Right.
And the Farquhar people were relatives who originally owned the property that the railroad had taken from them to use as a transportation corridor. And then the Farquhar family believed that the railroad didn't have the right to sell it to the city, and the city bought it without the clear title. And it did go to the California Supreme Court in a lawsuit, but the city of Manhattan Beach had spent millions of dollars trying to defend the purchase of the greenbelt, whereas in Hermosa Beach, the elected officials at the time were very smart about getting the title and not getting into the same problem that Manhattan Beach got into over the title issues as to the ownership of the greenbelt. So kudos to this council for being very smart about it and not winding up in a lawsuit.
To summarize, I think what you're saying to Chuck and me is thank you for your service.
Absolutely.
Thank you for
Absolutely.
Melissa.
But
Absolutely.
we, Jack Wood and I saw a plan that Santa Fe had to develop the site, so they had gone at least that far. And as Kathy said, there were single-family and multi-family units all along the right-of-way from Redondo all the way up to, what is it, El Porto, what's the street, the northernmost street in Hermosa?
Boundary place or
Which?
is it Duncan or
Boundary.
Boundary?
Cool.
No,
Cool.
36th Street, I just,
Long-
Neptune.
Is it
Neptune.
Longfellow? Oh,
Yeah.
not Longfellow?
Longfellow's right there as
Neptune is
well.
the northernmost, I think, so.
But you floated a bond to buy it, right? Is that how you?
Yes,
Yeah, right.
$7.5 million we had to pay for the whole greenbelt. I have some data here for that discussion. Has then developed, all the people with dogs then came out and said, well, I guess that's a good place for us to have a dog run in Hermosa Beach.
Yeah.
And it became a ballot issue. And dogs lost because they couldn't vote.
Oh, they had a ballot issue for the dog?
Yes,
God.
yes, F, Proposition F.
Brockhead.
And I was running for council
At that time.
at that time, and I got first on that, but I had, what's my name? I was okay on the things on the thing, and that lost. So I got on the top for the council, but blew it on the dogs. JR and I flew apart. And we've never been mean to each other, and he asked me at least 10 times, you're not gonna vote, you're not gonna run, you're not gonna run. And I said, no, you go have your fun. And it worked out good for me because I went, I got to work for Jim,
Jim Lowe?
no, we were just friends. But after him, was in LA, I worked for him 6 years, right after I got off the council. And so I was still on some of the thing, and I did six, yeah. And then I went to,
Down.
not yet, I went to Redondo Beach for a year and a half. Downey for 10 years,
Yeah.
and that's when I stopped.
You were appointed there, right? You were
Yes.
elected.
No,
Oh,
the
you can't be elected
council.
because you weren't
The
living there.
council.
Yeah, council appointed.
Yeah, and I really didn't work for them, and I really didn't work for the
City manager.
city manager.
Yeah, I'll throw this question out to the 80s group as I did to the 70s group, and I'm going to put all of you in a time machine. And if you could go back in time to when you were serving, is there anything that you did back then as council members that you would change or do differently now if you had the chance to do a do-over? Is there like a vote, you'd change your vote on something, or is there something that you regretted that you did back then that you could change now, or are you basically really happy with the decisions that you made back in the day, and if we took you today and moved you back, you would still do the same thing? Is there something that you'd like to have as a do-over?
I have one that has bugged me over the years, and I thought I was actually doing a good thing. There was a threatened strike with the police department under Earl Dillard, and they were going to have a call, a blew out, and it was presented as terrible. The world was going to fall apart if all this. And I remember getting a call from the city manager at the time saying, I think we found a solution. We're going to pick up an additional small percentage of the PERS contribution. And the blew out won't happen, and we'll move ahead, and everything's great. And I don't remember what it was, an additional 20% or 25%. And it's about the dumbest thing you can do. is to approve the amount, you know, a
So you
percentage.
changed the formula, the retirement formula
Right,
to make
and
it
then-
richer.
And to change the percentage. Better to give a guy $50, you know, which you can take back at some point in the future. But you put in a percentage of the PERS contribution, and that's forever. And so the city has continued to pay for that. It wasn't a huge amount at the time. But every time there's a raise in base salary or just in your salary, the city picks up an additional percentage of the PERS contribution. So that was not a smart one, and I just didn't think enough about it. And it embarrassed me when somebody pointed that out to me. So, other than that, I think I was perfect, as I think George was.
I was comfortable with all my decisions, really, even though I endorsed Jim and I did, we had financial trouble, and I did advocate a 3% salary reduction for police and fire. So they went out after me, full page ads in the paper, but you know what? That's life. I mean, you know, politics
Kathy,
is
anything
what it
that you
is.
would change if you had the chance to go back in time for a
Yes,
vote?
I would not I would have stayed out of the dogs.
Okay.
That was a big mistake,
All right.
and I admit it.
Okay.
And other than that, you know, there wasn't a heck of a long time, enough time to do much. We had so much at that time, low. Then buy from the school.
Chuck, anything you would change if you could go back in time?
We took up this issue, which I became very verbal about, which is merging our fire department with the county.
Okay.
I thought it was a good idea then. I still think it's a good idea in our little city. I don't know why we couldn't be a fire department supported by the county with a station in Hermosa. I don't know why we have to fund our own fire department. Didn't then, still don't. But it went to the council, and the place was packed. The city was very divided, ultimately lost. So that's one in which we didn't get 3 votes to do it, but we should have, in my judgment. We tried to tweak the open space requirements and the setback requirements in order to enhance the livability of these small lots that we have in Hermosa, and some of them succeeded and others didn't. In my judgment then, still is, that all of those things would have helped the livability over time of Hermosa. The most controversial one I mentioned briefly was the 17-foot setback. I lost a lot of friends, as all of us have made decisions in which we've lost friends as a result of that. I think that was passed and was a good decision. It's still in force and effect. There is we have had some strange characters, including myself, elected to the city of Hermosa Beach over the years. At least strange in some people's eyes, maybe not in all people's eyes. But there's a bandwidth of reasonability that has happened in this city, in which the city has relatively prospered, even though there have been a huge difference in the kind of people who served on the council. I'm very
Look
sad.
who I got.
Huh?
Look what I got when I got in there. 2 guys that came from nowhere.
Yeah, 2 of them had bootlegs. Yeah.
They shall remain nameless.
So anyway, I'm pretty sanguine with where Hermosa is now for over the course of years, as I've observed the councils, and, you know, there's little tweaks that go on, but there's a bandwidth of regionalness that I think has happened, no matter who is elected, that the powers that be, the city managers we've had, and very, very few. I mean, we were so fortunate, just to put a fine point on the Billboard side, when it lost by one vote, where we'd have had a 7-story hotel by Joe Lenwood, who was another weird dude. We lost by one vote because a councilman moved and his vote didn't count. That would have, you know, those are close calls that would have changed the whole situation in Hermosa.
You know, I want to just piggyback on one thing you said with like the cast of characters of people who have run over the years.
Don't take offense.
With that said, would you think about imposing term limits? Hermosa Beach is probably one of the only cities that does not have term limits for its elected officials. So would you
It works pretty
change
good.
it? So Kathy, you would.
I've been to 5 cities.
So you would move to term limits, given an
I
opportunity.
would hope, you know, that they would put it to the, you know,
Of the votes,
it's
yeah.
an easy thing. I think we tried it once.
Yeah, it has failed, but
I don't
it's just,
think that enough people were working
yeah.
on
What
it.
do you, Chuck, would you
Well,
support
whether
term limits or
whether
not?
it's the council in Hermosa or the representatives in Congress who don't have a term limit either.
Mhm.
The question is, in any given election, in my judgment, the most qualified, the most capable, most experienced, to the extent those apply, ought to be elected. So I'm not sure I would support term limits. George was on 3 times, and the city's prospered because of George was on. George, yeah, you were on twice. George was on 3 times. Lance was on 3 times.
No, last was twice.
Twice. Vervisky was on 3 times, right?
I
No.
think he's the last one.
Yes, he was.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'd be open to the discussion, but I'm not sure it's the right thing.
Okay. Jim, time machine, what would you do differently, if anything?
I was just thinking based on something that George Bark said, because I remember it was a campaign statement almost every time anybody ran was that we need to get these meetings over with by 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
You know? And that was in '74 when I first heard George Bark say it.
Right.
And here we are, almost 50 years later, and we still have no way of making sure that the meetings end by 11 o'clock, and in fact, they often don't. My TV goes off automatically sometimes before they do.
Well, my council tried to impose and did an 11 p.m. curfew unless the council voted to extend it
And then
for an
extend-
additional time, because, you know, you would have people sitting in the chambers wanting to speak on something. And, you know, here they're waiting for hours, and then you're going to end the meeting and they haven't had a chance to speak. So it is always very controversial to have a set time to end a meeting. And we tried to do it in the 2000s, and we actually did set a curfew, but then we gave ourselves the opportunity to extend on a vote.
I find it interesting that we have a 3-minute clock on the public.
Right.
not
That was the
on
Roger
council.
Bacon
Right.
rule.
Pardon?
That was for Roger Bacon.
That was for Roger, well, okay, maybe that's when it was installed, but it doesn't apply to the council, it seems either. And so therefore, that's why by God, I forgot to bring my gavel this time, but that's why we needed the gavel.
I tried to bring a thing for myself.
Timer.
Right
timer.
there.
Uh-huh.
And I also said, if we are telling the people for 3 minutes, we ought to do it ourselves.
Okay.
We've been pretty fortunate on that, multiple terms. George was
Three terms, yeah.
And we kept our head above water, and JR, I thought was 4.
Yeah, he was.
He was.
JR was for.
Yeah, I think he was 4, and he was one of the more serious-minded council people I know. I mean, he visited every site, everything that was on the agenda. He went out and, I mean, he really was prepared when it came to a council meeting compared to some who were obviously reading their packet the night of the council meeting. JR was always prepared, so losing him, I think, would have been, that would have been a good reason not to have term limits.
I'll make sure I ask JR that question when we have the 90s political
Yeah.
session here to
Yeah,
see
absolutely.
if he was, obviously he continued to run because he felt he could be a difference
Yeah.
maker, but at the same time, if the voters had decided to impose term limits, then he never would have had an opportunity to run as many times as he did successfully,
Yeah.
so.
Well,
I'd like to make a comment on this, on the term limits.
yeah, me too. Go ahead.
I think I can support term limits if a council person sits out a term and wants to run again.
Take
Like
that
in
Manhattan
Manhattan Beach,
Manhattan Beach is doing.
doing that. Now Redondo has tried to do it, put it on the ballot, hadn't been put on the ballot.
Right.
And the
Okay, so you
voters
would-
keep saying no.
You would tweak it.
Yeah, because like, you know, if you have a person like JR that puts in all this effort, should be able to come back. It's just like current council member in Manhattan now that worked for the county, or our supervisor. Yeah, he got reelected.
Right.
You know, he got elected coming in again and then reelected again. So, because the people are happy with it,
Okay,
or her.
interesting
Yeah.
choice. Jim, you wanted to comment on the term limits?
Yeah, I have to agree that there should be limits on it, but I like George's solution, which is to sit out and come back. And when you didn't do, and we're not going to be able to do, a section on council members of the 60s. None of them are around, but there was a guy that kind of treated this as his town in a unique way with the Quentin Thalen.
Yeah, he was mayor forever.
Yes, he
Yeah.
refused to allow
Right.
others to even serve as mayor. He just kept, you know, so you do get this kind of mental power trip
Right.
that sets in, that needs to be, you know, kept under leash, and you can't do that if you don't have any controls on it. So,
Don't say leash around Kathy.
okay,
Dogs.
okay.
Great.
One thing didn't come up that I was surprised was Prop 13. It took up an enormous amount of my council's time trying to figure out how do you get by on a lot less money than you were planning on getting by on. But that passed, what,
1978.
78?
Yeah.
Yeah, because what my final question was going to be, is there anything that you'd like to add that stands out in your mind? So in your case, George, it's Prop 13.
Lance and I went around to every club that would have us, speaking against Prop 13, and
Okay.
These weren't nightclubs, right? These were.
any place that was service, any place, and it won overwhelmingly.
Okay.
And I think it was not, still think it was not a very good idea. Again, I think it has a little bit of this, SB 9 has a little bit of Prop 13. One size fits all, and I think that is never a good solution. Schools have suffered tremendously, I think.
I would like to say something about
close
Prop
with?
13.
Sure, go ahead.
I was the only council member strongly in support of Prop 13. I even went to Sacramento. I even went on my own time, money. And San Francisco promoting it, the Howard Jarvis Gann initiative. And okay, it was a 4-to-1 council, and as George just said, he and Lance went out there trying to get people not to vote for it. Well, the Hermosa Kiwanis Club and the Hermosa Chamber of, well, actually, Chamber of Commerce, I guess. No, it was the Kiwanis Club president at the time, and the chamber. They said, we got to try to get this council to be more homogeneous, okay? So guess what? We all went down to Loreto, Mexico, our sister city, and you went, okay? And Prop 13 was on the ballot, but we were in Loreto. Our then finance director, city treasurer, Mary Stonier, she brought her radio. There was only one TV in town and one, phone in town at the time. It was 1978. And and they had a telegraph office, right? Well, here we're listening to the returns, and it was clear it was going to pass overwhelmingly, right? So guess what? Our then city treasurer and finance directors came up to me and said, well, George, you got what you wished for, and now when we go back, we're gonna have to close the doors of Hermosa Beach. And I said, no, Mary, I don't think we're gonna have to. We're gonna have to make some changes. But our then city manager, Earl Diller, said, and President Nixon was the president, and he had that CETA program, Comprehensive Employment Training Act.
Congressional Employment Training Act.
No, was it?
Congressional.
Congressional? Okay. So he hired all these young department heads just out of college, out of the universities, with less salary, and I guess there was some federal funding. And that's how we initially were able to keep the doors open, and look, we're fine.
If I could correct a fact, in 1978, Nixon had been out of office for 4 years.
Oh, yeah, but he's the one that came up with that congressional employment. I thought it was comprehensive.
It is
employment
comprehensive.
Training
Is
Act.
it comprehensive?
CETA.
I think it was.
Because
See,
I was on that program, so I can
Well,
speak
we
to
had
it.
plenty of employees.
yeah, you were working for Manhattan then, right?
I was actually working in the city of Torrance
Oh,
at the
okay.
time,
Okay.
under that program.
Okay.
So it is comprehensive. Yeah, there may have been a congressional
No,
employment
no, it
training
was
act as
CETA,
well, but
because I can remember.
but I know the CETA program that I was on in 1978 was a
Yeah,
comprehensive.
I remember it as Comprehensive Employment Training Act.
Yes,
Okay.
it was.
Yeah.
Kathy, anything that you'd like to close with? Anything you'd like to add at the end? Final statement?
Well, for myself, and it probably showed, I enjoyed being a city clerk more than a councilman.
Oh, okay.
And I went on here and there, and I'm very proud that 3 people I helped Mary, that was on the council. She went over to be the first city clerk of what's the new city?
West Hollywood?
Yes. And another girl that I mentored, thank you, in
Is that Mary Tyson? Which? Yeah.
Mary Tyson, and with, when I was the short time in there, the girl came and she won the thing to Torrance. And my third girl from my last place, yeah, she went to be the city clerk somewhere out near, and she's not there, but she was there for several years, out in the, out there by, where my,
In SoCal, right? SoCal.
yeah, out there.
Near San Diego?
Yeah.
So you're very proud of your
Yes.
mentoring
Yes, and
other.
I really liked it.
Yeah, that's a terrific.
That was very nice.
Chuck, anything you'd like to close out with?
Well, I think this has been an interesting discussion, and I think it's a great effort
Thank you.
on your part and everybody. An overriding issue that every council has faced, at least mine did and will, is the cost of our police and fire department. I don't know what percentage, pick a number, 65%?
Probably 70.
Maybe 70% of the
Yeah.
budget is police and fire. The pension programs, there are policemen and firemen making $200,000 or $300,000 a year. Maybe more. This is a city of 20,000. The pension programs that we have to pay for every year restrict our freedom financially enormously. And every single time this issue comes before council, it is very controversial. And I'm not sure, my council or any other council has come up with a solution for it, but someone has to figure out how to reduce the cost of police and fire in this city, maybe every city, and address this issue for future generations. Other than that, I've had a lot of fun.
That's almost like George Bark's time machine question. George would go back and would have changed, he would not have increased the pension obligation.
Right.
Yes.
And so that would have, going back, he would have changed that. So
And
that goes to your point,
I-
Chuck, as to, the police, fire, and how expensive it's become because mainly of the pension obligations.
I've thought for a long time the three cities should do.
Police.
Police,
Yeah.
fire.
Oh, that's
the
George's
three of
thing, the
us.
whole fire district. George is a big
But
proponent
they'll
of
kill you. They
having
won't
a
let you do
district.
it.
Right.
Yeah, so, but that's for another conversation.
Yeah.
Oh wait, I have a quick question. Was it
Sure.
in the, I'll cut this out if I'm
Sure.
wrong, was it in the 80s when the fire and police chief were actually combined into the same position of
80s,
safety?
yeah. He was the
Yeah.
first guy.
And I think it
The
was
guy
only
who dropped
him.
his gun in the council chamber.
No, that was earlier.
He dropped it and discharged it, or just dropped
Was
it?
that
Just
He was, he was,
Got to be, that was the old.
yeah.
You guys ultimately asked him to leave.
Both of them got asked, I think.
Oh.
We confiscated a Mercedes-Benz from a drug dealer, and they kept it at the police department. Used it to drive out to Palm Springs when he went up.
How nice is that?
And, yeah, but that's when you were able to keep I don't think you can keep the proceeds of the bad guys anymore.
You get a percent.
How much?
I don't know how much, but the cities get a percent, so there is an incentive
Oh, there is an
to
incentive.
confiscate,
Yeah.
whatever.
And then sell it.
But he's the guy that dropped the gun in the back of the
Yeah, in the
city
front.
council chamber. Clang, clunk, clunk.
I agree with Chuck, what he said here about the police and fire. And I think politically, it's almost impossible to do because I've been advocating it for years. I've gone
Yes, you
to
have.
every city council.
So you're
In
the
South Bay.
originator of the phrase defund the police?
No. What we need here, and this is an interesting point that Kathy brought up, because we have the Beach Cities Health District. The property owners of Manhattan, Hermosa, and Redondo own it. Prior to that, we had the South Bay Union High School District, which the people, by a few votes, voted to dismantle it. So these three cities have something in common here. They even have the Beach Cities Transit, okay? We should start with these three cities and then expand it to El Segundo, to Torrance, and have a South Bay Public Safety Department, because you're gonna get rid of duplication. You're going to be able to save some money, have better services. And this is one reason why I didn't want to go with the county fire, because look, 10 million people in the county, 5 board of supervisors making the budget decisions. And the long-term costs, in my opinion, are going to be a lot higher. They're already higher than when we had our little fire department.
I think
So-
we're hearing the kickoff campaign speech with George Bark.
George wants that public
Well,
safety
Chuck
district.
started it. He
We
says
could
it's
be the
a major issue, and it is, Chuck.
Before we finish here, just wanted to, since I'm the only one that hasn't spoken about the past, I think we should deal with the past still instead of the future. The issue that I wouldn't change, and I'm glad we did it, and it's been driven home to me many, many a time, that I'm glad we did, was we bought the green belt and we utilized it in a way that only enhances its use and its appearance, to where I went to a meeting where they were discussing undergrounding some of the water, the wastewater, gray water, whatever, rainwater. And the neighborhood was upset because the trees would come down and around them and all potentially with the work that would have to be done. And I thought, well, that was only 30 years ago, and those trees weren't even there then. And now, obviously, we've come to appreciate what we've created. And thank God we did it. And my wife today said, be sure to bring up the green belt. And she only moved here 20-some years ago. So,
That was a major decision that turned out extremely favorable for everybody.
That's our council, right, Jim?
yes.
Yeah. So that you could certainly hang your hats on that as one of the top major accomplishments that the five of
And we
you
had the school
were
at the
involved
same
with at
time
the
almost.
time. So
And we
very impressive.
gave away a part, but got the.
Howard, thank you for doing this.
Yeah, no,
Thank
thank
you for
you.
your time. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Appreciate
pleasure.
all of it. Yes.
Does that make you a municipal prostitute?
Yeah, it does actually.
You know what, that brain
We'll strike that
surgery-
part out of the, it'll be edited out.
Maybe that brain surgery I had a few months ago is helping me. I don't know.